Yo, people, welcome back to the YouTube channel. You know what I mean? We had a little day break, give you a little time to digest the double upload with Miz, Eunice, Darren Bent, and now got another great guest. You've seen him before, son of Chelsea. My bro, welcome to the building. How are you? How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me back, especially because the last time we collabed was straight after the City game, wasn't it? So have had time to recover, and it's been a pretty weird week in terms of like a lot of content about sort of and discussion about the future of Chelsea long term. I'm sort of happy to just sort of focus on a game now where hopefully we're going to see something that does look hopefully towards the future of Chelsea with some exciting talent that could feature. But I feel that hopefully this will be a good sort of pause or breather, sort of an escape from the Premier League and hopefully a good result. So and a good performance from certain players. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting game.
100%. I feel like all week it would have been almost rude not to address the future of Chelsea because that's literally the topic that everybody's talking about. There's nothing really else going on. There's not really any transfer news. I feel obviously the disease is kind of affecting that in the fact that clubs don't have the money or potentially, you know, Chelsea and specifically have to offload a lot of players to even move into the transfer market anyway. We know this. We've got a very heavy squad. So we haven't got the distractions that we're looking for in terms of hoping that we can cover multiple different types of topics. It really is just about the future. But today, in this preview, we can really just focus on the game. Really, it should be straightforward. But I was saying this on a stream yesterday. I want to get your thoughts on this as well. There is still an element of, yo, we still need to turn up as a team. We can't just take it for granted. I remember going back to like, you know, old FA Cup games that we played. Do you remember when we had Bradford in the FA Cup?
I was at that game. I was at that game I was in the Matthew Ward Lower that day, and yeah, it was incredible. And the incredible thing is, as Frank mentioned in his press conference, was that season we won the Premier League and we won the League Cup. So that was a very good Chelsea team. So yeah, you can't take anything for granted. I think the weird thing about these games and going into them mentally is usually it's a very heavily rotated team. So it's hard to predict sometimes the starting 11. And sometimes the team that actually starts is completely alien to what you've been used to in the Premier League. I do wonder, based on the struggles recently, if that is going to change tomorrow and Frank will actually put out a much stronger team than he would usually do in these situations. So I think that's an interesting thing to think of as well. Despite the quality of the opposition, I think that it could still be a really strong team, given the nature of how strong our squad is anyway. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how I think certain players, I feel like this type of game right now is great for fringe players. Like I feel like Chelsea struggling, whilst of course isn't good for us and isn't good for the fans or Lampard or the first team squad, I feel there are certain fringe players, like if Chelsea were right in form and doing really well, there'd be a sense that, well, they're just coming in for one game and that's it, right? If we had real settled, like guaranteed starting 11 that we had about a month ago, it'd been really difficult for some of these fringe players. But I think there's an expectation or at least a chance now that certain players can really grab this game by the scruff of the neck, despite the opposition, and maybe put themselves in contention for games like Leicester, Fulham coming up, because you know, there's going to be changes, maybe a change of system, and that could maybe benefit players that you don't expect to be in the first team picture.
Yeah. And speaking of players that are not going to be available with the fringe players, at least anyway, we know Kante's out, Reece James as well, but a fringe player who potentially could have, you know, played himself maybe into the reckoning. I think our defense hasn't been so solid now that it's completely non-negotiable that players can come into it, although I still do like the first choice back four for the time being. Christensen's out. You know, and I want to start with him because he did get a lot of heat from the Man City game for, you know, not getting up, not rising to the occasion. Excuse the pun, but you know, he wasn't able to recover from the challenge. And now it's actually gone down that he's actually injured. I think that's surprised a lot of the fan base. And, you know, especially me, you know, I was on the byline, remember that after the game, and we did criticize the fact that, you know, not the fact that he didn't get up, but if it was anyone, we would have expected to be him kind of thing, where we're not surprised it's Christensen that is part of the goal that we concede, isn't the one that is able to struggle for a rough challenge. What's your view on it now? Because I know you was quite disappointed with the initial, the initial reaction to it, but then obviously now he's injured, so it's a different situation, isn't it?
Yeah, I got to hold my hands up and say I was wrong in this, because I was, like a lot of people, I was quite critical of Christensen. And Christensen is probably one of those players I am more critical of than other players. But I was wrong on that, you know, in terms of it wasn't a case of him being weak. It was a case of, you know, he was injured, and it's very difficult. And I think that you go back to that goal and just, it's hard because it's a couple games ago and you sort of don't want to just sort of dwell on those games. But you would have asked a player to cover for him there, and unfortunately there wasn't at that time. So, despite my criticisms of Christensen and my doubts about him, which I don't think this changes or anything, I still wouldn't have him in the first team. I think there needs to be sort of an understanding that, it was an injury. It's clearly hurt him and he could be out for an extended period of time. And I do wonder how that's going to shape up this month with potential players leaving. I think of Fikayo Tomori, and there's a potential that, say, if Christensen, worst case scenario, is out for a very long period of time, you do wonder if Chelsea may still keep Tomori, as ridiculous as that sounds, given being nowhere near the first team. And this is another game that you think that Tomori would be right in line to start. But I still doubt that he'll actually feature at all tomorrow, because given his future, will he be off? Some links to Leeds this week. That's going to be interesting. But with Christensen, I hope he gets better. I hope the injury isn't too severe, because you do wonder, like the FA Cup, it is one of those places where, barring major injuries in the first team for the Premier League, where is he going to get his football? And that's the case for a lot of players. So it's a shame for him, because this absolutely would have been a game I think him and Rudy would have started. So just hope the injury isn't too detrimental to his season. Even if he comes back fully fit a few months later, when's he going to play again? That's the thing, because it's basically Champions League and Premier League, and that's it for Chelsea after the FA Cup. If we have an extended, the hope for Christensen is we have an extended run in the FA Cup, and there are some games that, of this nature in the opening rounds where Frank will be more inclined to heavily rotate.
100%. And I'll build off that. Big up to everybody in the chat joining us live. Some regulars in there: Polar Bear, YB1, I Test Merchant, Wayne, I see you in there as well. B Productions, big up to all you, man. Thank you so much for joining us. We're not even that late. Do you know what I mean? I keep saying lateness is greatness when we start, but we actually was only like 5 minutes late, so it's not even that deep. Frank Lampard is always late. Have you noticed that? Like, I don't think I can remember a press conference he's ever been on time. They say 1:30 now for the press conference. I come in at quarter two. I just naturally come in at quarter two because I know he will not be there. Another thing that I wanted to add, which is building on your point, which is really interesting, is the fact that you mentioned the centre back Tomori, who's obviously linked with Leeds quite heavily. I believe that's the main link that he potentially will be going out on loan. And that with Christensen, if he was fit, he probably would not have been playing. I agree with you. I'm still, it's nuts, isn't it, the Tomori situation? But I'm not confident that he's going to play even this game. And is that because we're trying to save him for injury or to get the loan, or what is it? Because we're not insiders in the fact that we're on the training ground seeing what's going on. So there obviously is legitimate reason for why this has gone down the way it's gone down, because it doesn't make any sense to me from an outsider looking in why Tomori's just been frozen out the way he has. But for us to be questioning if he can get a game against Morecambe in the FA Cup just goes to show how far he's fallen. This is a player that was, for me at the start, he was the first player last season from everyone from the Cobham setup that came into the first team. He was the first one to really take to the first team in terms of consistent performances, playing very well, and looked like he was going to be a mainstay in the team, and at least in the squad. Now he's looking like a player that, he's come out, I think, recent reports saying that he's looking to leave, minimum on loan, but I think he would take a permanent at this point. And with all the players coming through, we're getting linked with, so many defenders. We've got so many defenders in the club as well. Ampadu, you've got Guehi, you've got so many others as well. And the fact that, Tomori just doesn't seem to be part of that. What percentage would you stick on him playing tomorrow? Because I really don't have it very high at all.
I think it'd have to be under 50%. I think that I'd still lean towards Zuma and Rudiger being the partnership, just to sort of keep because once again, I go, Lampard trying to keep still a strong nucleus of a team there. And the hope is as well is that I think Frank maybe will look at certain senior players, like as I'm sure we'll get into in terms of the young players coming into this team. I think people will, I don't know the team, but I think people will be stunned that I think it's very likely that none of those 4 or 5 players that have come in won't start tomorrow, because we've got 5 subs. And I think it's very likely that it's basically, with the exception of maybe Andrew and Gilmore, I think it's going to be a very senior team in a sense, because I think that there are still many players who haven't played a lot of football this season. It's strange with Tomori, and it's hard to know because, we've got Sarr out on loan at Porto as well. you can never go past Chelsea in the summer going for another centre back, especially if Thiago Silva, whether that be a Jimenez from Atletico Madrid or Upamecano from Leipzig potentially. So knowing Chelsea, they want to spend big. And, if you think about as well, Declan Rice, potentially, if he was to come in the future, he could play at centre-back too. So you start to wonder what's going to happen with Tomori. And it's such a shame because to me, I think he adds... I made a video about transfers and I said that for me, he adds that assurance, recovery runs, mobility. And I think he could sort of be what the club hoped Christensen would be, because I think actually Tomori's got that physicality that he can deal with the Premier League that I don't think Christensen has. I think he desperately needs a loan away. So I don't know why. I could understand, if he's not in the first team squad tomorrow, then I think absolutely guaranteed he goes out on loan. But then he could, in the other sense, you could go, maybe putting him out there on show for him to impress potentially for a loan as well. So it's hard to really gauge at the moment. I just think for his own sake, his own personal career, no matter what happening with Chelsea at the moment, he needs minutes.
I would agree with that. I've got an interesting comment here from Bernie, and I just want to read really the first sentence and touch on that mainly because we're not going to focus too much on Lampard right now or at all really because that's been main focus all week. I don't care about the FA Cup. Full stop right there. How? Do you know what I mean? I cannot move on without questioning that. For me, even the Carabao Cup this season, when we went out to Tottenham, I was slightly devastated because, to be honest, it was our, I consider these cup competitions for where we're at right now as our only two realistic shots at a trophy. And I've been banging on about all week, all season, all last season, how important it is for this club and for this team, especially this young team, to get a trophy under their belt. They're a young team. They're still forming. They're still, gaining their confidence at a club of this stature, a lot of them. And the manager is also inexperienced as well. And he needs a trophy under his belt as a manager. I would have said to myself, FA Cup, if anything, not priority over the league, but it's huge. We should be trying to win this because I remember the defeat against Arsenal as well. And not just because we have a big squad. And I think going out the Carabao Cup, potentially has caused some of this unrest that we're hearing, Players are unrest. Well, they haven't been able to play because we haven't got as many games because we got knocked out the Carabao Cup. But also, the FA Cup defeat against Arsenal. I mean, how different would things be at Chelsea right now in terms of just the mood if Frank Lampard had already secured a trophy? I think things would have been a little bit different. Maybe there would have been a bit more patience. I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, you have to look at I was reading an article about this and sort of the importance about the FA Cup, which gets brought up every year, and especially to modern managers at top clubs like the crave for Champions League qualification and thinking about what does look at Arsenal, for instance, they won that FA Cup and for them that felt like a massive landmark, but really has it been a springboard for success? I mean, despite their recent resurgence, I wouldn't say it is, it didn't turn them into, a better team. They've really struggled this year. So the idea it's going to have that magical effect, I think that to say he's proved he can't win it. He beat Leicester, Man United, Liverpool on the way to the final last year. I think the performance was really poor, I think, or at least there were elements of the performance after going 1-0 up in a final that disappointed me. But we got two injuries to two key players, Dave and Pulisic going out. I mean, Pulisic was in incredible form at the time, and I think if he would have stayed on the pitch, I think it's a different game. Cover shouldn't have been sent off. So there were elements in that game that unfortunately just, the thing is you find out, a lot of the time with finals, with the rare exceptions, they are very tight contests and they are judged in, you look at a lot of the finals we've won in those situations over the years and you go back and watch those games, fine margins. So I think Frank will look at this as not only a great escape from the Premier League slump at the moment, but see it as a chance to, like Gilmour, I think this is a big chance for potentially some young players to impress Frank and get into the picture of the first team. And if you can put a run together, I mean, you got to think that hopefully, fingers crossed, fans will be back in stadiums in the springtime. That's why they've moved back the League Cup. And for me, I think that winning an FA Cup would be so special for Lampard and for Chelsea. So yeah, I don't know why you dismiss it. And the thing is, it's like, if you're going to say you don't care about the FA Cup, but then have a go at managers for not winning trophies, then I think that you can't really argue those two things at the same time. Because here is the chance for a piece of silverware. So yeah, that's just weird. I mean, what? So you're happy with us losing to Morecambe tomorrow? I mean, this is the.
If we lose to Morecambe tomorrow, the absolute eruption on the TL will be nothing you've ever seen before.
No, but this is the trade-off, isn't it? It's like, I think people at the moment are making a lot of rash comments and statements because of the state of our form, without actually looking at the wider picture. If Lampard wins a trophy this season, I don't think. I think it'd be very hard, unless he finishes like 10th, to see him not be here next season, because I think that'd be a massive thing for the squad, right? Of course, Champions League qualification, I think is very important this year, but no, you can't dismiss a trophy like the FA Cup, because as fans, it's the best feeling seeing your club win a trophy. There's no better feeling.
Yeah, I'm even starting to go the other way, and maybe it's cautious and worry on my part, but if he was to win a trophy, and we was to finish 4th, but it was a very, not a false position, but a very lucky 4th position that we managed to retain, in the fact that we can see that the league is very destructive in the fact that, points are not being picked up so well. And really it's all about, if we was to finish 4th with an FA Cup, that is a successful season objectively, if you go along with the plan, which is, a lot of people are forgetting. I think Brian did a really good thread on this on Twitter, is that he was ahead of schedule last season, finishing in the top 4. So now this season, that's why my minimum expectation is top 4, because that would have been along the same course as the original plan before he overachieved in the first place. But if he was to finish 4th, win an FA Cup, but we didn't improve on the pitch, and Havertz and Werner didn't improve, I wouldn't actually be too disappointed if the hierarchy at the club said, you know what, we're going to shake hands, part ways on a good note, just in case it goes sour. That's probably being overly cautious. But if there wasn't any more progression from him as a manager this season, in terms of the way the outcome of the season ends, not just objectively, but you have to look on the pitch as well. And Werner, Havertz, key players didn't improve their form. We still were making, it still looked like he were making tactically mistakes in game. He was making mistakes in game as a manager. And we were still questioning a lot of his meritocracy with certain players and whatnot. I wouldn't really be against them saying, right, we're going to part ways on a high. You've won a trophy, and at least then you're not jeopardizing his managerial career. You're not jeopardizing the next season as well, where you can get a really top experienced manager, and you give him the opportunity to say you've now been technically and categorically a success, and then go and get your experience, come back in 5-6 years and we go again, kind of thing. So that's, maybe it's cautious on my part, but that is how I'm starting to look at it. How would you look at it if that was to go down?
I think it's easy to say in a hypothetical, because I think that big wins mean a lot to fans, and they have a massive impact on the way you feel about the club. And the FA Cup is the final domestic game of the season, so unless we miraculously make the Champions League final, that would be Chelsea's final game of the season. And you go into the summer feeling, a massive sense of, I guess a massive positive. I think that this is the thing I come back to once again of criticism of Lampard, of things that have been discussed recently, is I just think it's a conflict in the argument I'm seeing, that I just think, it doesn't really line up to me when we're talking about style of play and we're talking about standards at Chelsea, in the sense that, Chelsea haven't, it's never really, you look at our success, it's never really been about style. And that's not my personal opinion. I'm just looking at, what's happened. And I think that I see a lot of arguments at the moment, people simultaneously saying, I have massive high standards from Chelsea and we should be winning the league, and we need to get rid of Lampard and bring in someone better. But then also talking about style of play, and not sort of understanding that there is sort of a trade-off there, in terms of understanding you've got to give a coach time to instill that, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that it's a bit hard for me to grasp that argument and not feel that there's a bit of hypocrisy there, because, winning a trophy, a lot of people I hear at the moment, winning a trophy should mean a lot to fans who are criticizing Lampard at the moment, right? I think that if you start shifting the goalposts around with Lampard and he wins a trophy, it's the thing with Sarri, right? Everyone was having a go at Sarri for not winning a trophy, and he not only got us top 4, but he won a trophy as well. He proved that he could do it in some style. So I think it's the same with Lampard. If he goes and does it, I think there'll be a lot of people who have to hold their hands up and say he has won a trophy. If he gets 4th, it's like, if we're 40 points from the top, 30 points from the top again, then I would be concerned in the sense of a league. If we're 4th, but we're 10 points, let's say. I know that may seem unrealistic at the moment because we don't know how the second half of the season is going to go. But if he's 10 points, I think it's a little bit different because then I would see that, okay, we have dropped. Yeah, I think there's a lot of caveats that get thrown about. And I saw this in Sarri's season once again, where people would try and say that, look at the failings of other teams. That's why we got Champions League football. They said the same about Lampard last year. I think it's very easy to go to caveat city and go, this happened last year and constantly measure things that could have happened. You play within the season you're in. And I think that we got to judge him on what's happening right now. And if he gets top 4, which I think will be enough probably for the board, if he gets Champions League football, retains that once again and wins a trophy, I think it's very hard to see him off. The thing is about Conte and Sarri there was a lot of toxicity behind the scenes or a lot of struggle behind the scenes. Despite what we're hearing recently, if there's not that much friction between Lampard and the board, I think the board may be happy to move on with him because they'll see, there's not that sense of constant animosity and hostility between like banging heads constantly, like with Conte, for instance.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they may look at it and go, we've got a happy camp. There's not, constantly friction. Cobham's not a horrible place to be at. Lampard is cultivating something here. And, to be fair, he's won his first trophy here. Let's see what happens next year. Hopefully in a normal world, hopefully things are back to normal by 2022.
Yeah.
He'll have a full preseason, maybe with some new players to add on to this one, gel with the squad for another season. I know this is all ifs and buts, but I think that's the thing that you have to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, very well said, very well said. We're getting a lot of comments about Upamecano at Leipzig, because obviously that's the latest link to a new centre-back. Apparently Chelsea are chasing him with Real Madrid and Barcelona. I want to get your thoughts on him. I'm personally not keen, and a lot of people in the chat don't seem to be, but there are mixed opinions here. From what I've seen of him, I've been saying it for the last year, really, is he is a ball-playing centre-back. He is someone that likes to play off in the back, but I do worry about his concentration. A lot of the time, I do worry that he's a bit rash, and he does remind me of Rudiger sometimes in that sense that he can be a bit rash, and he is young, so I have to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's still developing. But I don't feel like he's what we need in terms of, if we're going to go for a centre back, I prefer someone more experienced because I can still see a lot of young defenders coming through. First of all, that have high potential. I think Thiago Silva, obviously, this season, max next season, and then you're missing a lot of leadership and experience there. Zuma. Still question marks over whether he's going to be able to take the mantle as someone who's going to be leading the defence. I still have massive question marks around that, and I'm not convinced about the other two seniors. So I would still probably lean towards getting a senior centre back that's got the experience and leadership. But what's your thoughts on the link?
I was very impressed with him in the Atletico quarterfinal, I think it was, in the Champions League last year.
Yeah.
He had an incredible performance against Diego Costa, and whatever, I'm massive, bias towards Diego Costa, but I felt that, in terms of what Costa brings and the challenge that he brings to a centre back, and you think about sort of what he'd be dealing with in the Premier League on a regular basis, in terms of more physical strikers, you're always sort of looking at how they can deal with that. It's not just about dealing with fast forwards. It's about dealing with the physicality of the Premier League that's just relentless. And you get, when you're coming up against Burnley, you're coming up against Southampton, you come against very different opposition in the Premier League, and it can be very intense. So that's why you see players struggle to adapt. I think it's a delicate balancing act for Chelsea at the moment in terms of that position, because there aren't many obvious names out there like there may have been in the past. And I look internally at Gurhey, how well he's doing at the moment at Swansea. He's getting rave reviews on a weekly basis. I'm not sitting here and telling you he's going to be ready for next season, but the club has shown us, at least under Lampard, the capability of saving money on key positions by promoting young players. I don't know why we can't do that in that same position. We were just talking about Fikayo Tomori, but I look at Malang Sarr, who I think is an interesting shout, because I think it's a great piece of business by Chelsea in terms of it being sort of a win-win situation in that sense, because free signing in the summer. If he turns out to be brilliant, he comes back into the first team and we haven't spent a bunch on him. If he doesn't, we make a profit from him. So it's difficult. I think that it's obvious that the club have to be thinking about beyond Thiago Silva and have to be thinking about what that plan is. And I know that Jimenez is another. I feel like as well, it's the style of play, right? Leipzig, and this is the issue that maybe Werner's had adapting to what we do and Havertz as well, is that you got to think about the style of play. Like Harry Maguire, for instance, done really well at Leicester because they defended quite deep. And then when he had to move over to Man United and they're stepping up further up the pitch and you have to play a higher line as Man United, you can find those defenders struggle with that. I think he's got obviously better mobility and pace than Maguire will, but it's what style of play are we going to have? What is he going to bring to the team? And can he deal with that, in terms of what the Bundesliga presents to him on a weekly basis compared to what the Premier League does? I feel it's not come from a massive source at the moment in terms of stuff I trust. I've heard, if I was to talk about sources I trust, I would go more. I've heard Jimenez's name mentioned more often, and I think that's maybe a better shout. I mean, someone being coached defensively by Simeone, that's a really good defensive setup, as I'm sure Chelsea will see in a month's time in the Champions League. If I was to pick one out of the two, if you said I can only pick one, I'd say Jimenez, because I think he'd maybe be more suited to the Premier League.
Yeah, I'd agree that. I think you're getting a little bit more. You're getting a little bit more solid base in terms of what you're getting with Jimenez. But if he comes here, I feel like you're almost guaranteed to get someone who's ready-made for the Premier League, physically, mentally, those things. The only issue with Jimenez is that he's a little bit injury-prone, which a lot of Atletico Madrid fans seem to say as well. But I mean, Upamecano is a good player. Don't get me wrong, people. I think he's a talented player and he's got potential. But I don't know if he's exactly what we need. I don't, because I think, like I said, I think there's a balance to be struck in that defence with leadership and experience. And I don't think we need another young defender when we've got so many young defenders coming through. I'd like to see what their ceiling is first before we purchase another one, because we do have a lot. That's just my thoughts on it. But let's move on to another couple starters before we get to the really young players coming through Cobham. Also, we saw yesterday with Aston Villa, right? Young players can do big things. Do you know what I mean? Against big opposition. Now, obviously, we're playing against Morecambe. No disrespect to them, but we've got some young players coming through as well. But did you get to watch the Aston Villa game? What did you make of the performance, if you got to see it?
Talking about young players, I wasn't watching that game live. I was watching Charlton versus Accrington Stanley, which had Maatsen and Nathan Baxter in the game. And Baxter actually had a really good game for Accrington, who won 2-0. He made a couple of brilliant saves. Maatsen, I think it was different. The first goal wasn't his fault. It was a long ball from Baxter that literally, do you remember that goal Germany scored against us, almost from a kick from the goalkeeper? It literally launched forward, and there was a typical League One goal. Where it mixed up from the defense. But no, I wasn't watching. But I did obviously see the replay of the goal that Aston Villa scored. And it was good to see. And I think it's good experience for these players. And I think that obviously it's very unique circumstances. I was just watching Chorley beat Derby, and Derby had the same situation because of COVID. They had to basically put out an under-21s team, and they lost 2-0. So it shows, and as we've seen under Lampard, I think the best element of Lampard's time at Chelsea, and I think it's going to be his legacy probably if he doesn't win a big trophy with us, is instilling a belief that there is a route to the first team for these young players now, and that's something that I don't think should be underappreciated, because I think it could save the club a lot of money, not only in terms of the money we make from players who don't make it, because I think that's an underappreciated element of the way we do transfer business, because naturally not all these players are going to make it. There's a very small percentage of them that are good enough to play for Chelsea. But the ones who do get a chance hopefully can take it. And I think that you're seeing some serious players coming through that I think we hope will be big parts of our team moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you only have to look at Carl Lamptey as well. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a big fee for him, but that just goes to show the level of talent that we have that can still go out the door. I was saying it during the moment, because a lot of people were blaming the club and maybe didn't understand the ins and outs of it, but really Chelsea couldn't do much about the transfer unless they signed him up to a long contract a couple of years before. That moment that he was coming into, where he was in his last 6 months and he'd obviously just made his debut and everything was going on. And like I said, when you have if it was just Azpilicueta, I have no doubts he would have signed the new contract and we would have had him here playing now. But because Reece James is there, it's very hard to convince a young player like that, of that talent, that you should stay here for the whole of your career, battling it out with someone roughly just a bit older than you for your whole career, right? But in a position that we don't really rotate if you're a serious offence. It's not really feasible. I mean, the only way to manage that situation would have been to move Reece James to midfield, which I would not have been against to keep Lamptey, because I do think it would have been an incredible coup for us to keep him. But Reece James has been so good at right back; it's very hard to just move him like that. And you've got other experienced players like Kante and players like that in the midfield to contend with. So let Lamptey be the example where that level of player can leave. So never just assume that all these players are going to make it, and never really build your hopes up too high to the point where every player that you catches your eye at a high level will make it here, because there's so much more that goes into it than just player ability. We've got a question here from YB1. Villa's team had to study for the GCSEs after. Yeah, man. I mean, do you know what? Yeah, I was so impressed with them to a whole new level, because really, I know what happened in the second half happened. Shaqiri got a double assist in like 2 minutes and the game was over. But that first half, yes, Liverpool had all the possession, but they had all the possession and didn't really do nothing with it. The score was fair. It was a 1-1, but, Aston Villa worked their socks off. And like you said, you got players in there that are 16, 17. A lot of people will think it was just the under 23s. There's a lot of under 18s in there as well that really had no, from a meritocracy standpoint of going up through the ranks, had no real right to play in that level of fixture. But obviously, we know the circumstances that surround it. Barry getting his goal, and it was a great run from him. Really good running behind, like something that you want Timo Werner to start doing the next few weeks as well, hopefully. And literally ran in behind and slotted it past the goalkeeper with such ease. You would have thought that he'd been playing at that level for years. So I was really impressed with that team, and that there is, that should hopefully draw inspiration to a lot of our young players that could potentially make their debut off the bench to come in and make an impact, because you don't have to play it safe, so to speak, against Morecambe. I think really provides these young players an opportunity to express themselves as well. I want to talk about Billy Gilmour and Callum Hudson-Odoi quickly, because I think they're probably both going to start. I'd be surprised if they didn't. Both players in different situations, in the fact that Gilmour's more just come back from an injury, so there's not really an impatience for him to start. But I do feel like he is due a start now in a game like this, especially to not only keep getting his fitness up, but also because he's played well the few cameos he's got. And Hudson-Odoi, a completely different level in terms of he's just been on form. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of people will say save him for Fulham. I'll try and play Hudson-Odoi whenever we can. Do you know what I mean? I don't care. Yeah. I don't care if it's against Morecambe or Man United. I think he needs to play regardless. What are you looking forward to those two? I think they're fresh injections as well, even though they're not making their debuts, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that in the case of Gilmour, interesting because, Kante's going to be out for Fulham. So, Frank has to make a decision of who he's going to put in that midfield, especially off the back of the City defeat and thinking about the issues we've had in there in terms of being done in midfield. So that's going to be quite intriguing. Gilmour, I think, will likely play as an 8 tomorrow. I think that Jorginho will likely start deeper.
Yeah.
But I would love to see, I think Gilmour, for me at least, what I'm seeing recently, I think Gilmour just offers what Lampard really requires in his team, in his midfield, more than say Jorginho does. Unfortunately, I also think Jorginho just been off form this season. I just, at times, in the past, I felt that he's just not been suited to what Lampard does. I just think personally in his own performances, he just hasn't been at good enough standard this year. He hasn't been offering enough progressive passes. I think his vision of passing has been quite poor and quite limited. And, that people who demean him say that he's never had that. He has had that in his game. Even I remember a game against Palace earlier in the year, he had a really good game. From deep with Kante sitting alongside him. So I think those two are playing, and you think this is the type of game where those two players can excel in sort of midfield. And yeah, for Billy, I think it's a big opportunity. And then for Callum, yeah, he has to be playing. And I'm excited because I think that Havertz will start as well. And I feel that Callum and Havertz already have a really good connection. I think Havertz has assisted Callum 3 times this season against West Brom, Krasnodar and Man City last weekend. So he's set up 3 goals for him so far this season. So those two clearly work off each other very well. Yeah, Callum, as I was saying earlier about fringe players, this is their opportunity. I feel this is a moment that is tailor-made for Callum to really come into the first team and prove himself. I think that maybe in the past it's been difficult for him when he's been in form, and other players have been in form in front of him. So it's been hard to get into the team. I don't think that's the case right now. And I'd even think that given the formation. I know obviously this isn't a Fulham preview, but given the way Frank could set up against Fulham, I think there's an absolute chance that Callum can start that game as well in form. So hopefully he takes this opportunity. And I like to see him just be a bit more direct, and really show sort of no respect at times. I think he overthinks sometimes. And I'm not saying he's a Pulisic, in terms of trying to define what Callum is. I think people maybe see him as a real goal machine, when actually I think he's more of a, you'd hope he's a hybrid between a Ziyech type player and a Pulisic, right? I think he does lean more in a direction of an assister rather than a goal scorer. I don't think he's as hungry for goals. But when he does get himself, as we've seen this season, when he does get himself into good positions, he's finishing well. I think he's exceeding his XG in, I don't know if it's both the Premier League or the Champions League, but in terms of the actual chances he's got, he's taking them. So hopefully that will continue tomorrow.
Yeah, I have to say, I think his finishing has improved. I was very impressed with the goal against Rennes, particularly. I know the goal against Man City was more of a back post tap-in type thing, but when I've seen us put the ball across the box so often and players not be on the end of those, then I'm impressed with that as well. And I'm impressed with the mental side of him, understanding that he needs to get to the back post and actually make that finish and understand that you are there for output. But the goal against Rennes, I spoke to Darren Bent this week as well, and I tried to get inside pick his brain a bit in terms of a striker. When you're running in on goal, and he's obviously a winger, but so it must be even more daunting for him. But he was saying that when you're running in on goal and you've got all that time to think about it, and then you've got to, you're thinking about your first touch, you're thinking about where the defender is who's chasing you, you're thinking about if the goalkeeper's coming out, what type of finish you're going to do. There's so much rushing through your head that you don't have when you're making instinctive one touch or two touch finishes in the box or even outside the box going for long ranges. But when you're running in on goal, I can't think of anything more difficult as a forward player than that moment there, because you're expected to score. If you miss, it's a mistake. And there's so much going through your head. There's so much different things that you need to weigh up, that you need to keep under your control. Your composure, of course, is huge. But there's so many things you got to weigh up. The fact that he was able to make that run, and make it on time. We've had the strikers in the past that have been offside a lot and not been able to make that run. But the fact he was able to make that run and calmly settle himself down and make such an established finish was really impressive. And it's something that Pulisic obviously worked on a lot at the back end of last season as well. So I think, from just not even from a merit standpoint, a development standpoint, I think Callum Hudson-Odoi is starting to come leaps and bounds. And he's even saying in his quotes that he's starting to feel like he's getting back to what he wanted to be in the first place, which is, recovering from his injury. He's defensively doing his job, using his body to win the ball back, making goal contributions in terms of his assists and his finishing when he gets the opportunity as well. And also, like he said, he's a creator. You don't get much wingers that are better than him 1v1 and better with their pass completion in the box and really, making sure that their final product is creative and trying to set up opportunities for others. So his stats in that regard are very good. Him and Ziyech, their stats for chance creation in the box are very good. So I'm looking forward to hopefully him playing against Morecambe. But as I said in a tweet last week, I don't want it to just be Morecambe. I think he deserves to start against Fulham, and I think he deserves to get a run of games. And that's just, for me, that's what I was, a bit disappointed that he didn't get the start against Man City, and we did revert back to this TL front three, so to speak, that everybody wanted, because I didn't think it was based on merit. I didn't think it was based on even a smart game plan, in my opinion. The amount of crosses we put in for a striker like Werner, who doesn't head the ball, it didn't make any sense to me. So I think definitely get Hudson-Odoi into this team tomorrow and see what he can do. I expect this team to win comfortably, to be honest, with the opposition we're going up against. But I do want to get onto some youngsters. You got Bate, and there's a great comment here that I want to read out, which again is throwing a lot of realism at the table. Henry Lawrence, who I think is closer to starting than Livermento, because a lot of people do speak about Livermento a lot. Maybe he's the new kid on the block that everyone's excited about. Certainly, he's got a lot of potential. But I think Henry Lawrence, for the experience and the fact that he's already trained with the first team as well previous to this game. I can't remember what game it was, but he did train with the first team. I think him and Andrin. He's probably more likely to get the start if you are picking who's getting the start. But like you said earlier, I think probably everyone will start from the bench. And then Jude Spoons Up Bell, is that how you say it? He's everybody's very excited about this kid. Now, I don't know if it's because of that goal that he scored, that one goal that everybody is playing back. but he is obviously getting a lot of goals. He's looking like a very accomplished finisher, looking like someone that can run with the ball, shoot with both feet, it seems, as well. But again, I want to, calm everyone down. He is still 16 years old. There's a long way to go for him. And someone said quite well here in this comment, Livermento, will he make it here? You got Reece James tax, you got Lewis Bate, Gilmore tax. It's very difficult for these players to break in.
Well, that's not even mentioning the ones that on loan at the moment. You've got to think of Conor Gallagher. Potentially Ethan Ampadu could fit into a Chelsea midfield in the future. There are so many players that I think you even forget about, and Andrew as well. Andrew, despite probably playing in a more advanced role tomorrow, can still play in central midfield too. He can be a number 8. So it's difficult. It's so competitive at Chelsea, but that's the way it should be for a club of our size.
That's how it should be, because it raises the standards 100%. I mean, you've got Andrew dealing with Mount, Havertz, like you said, the players out on loan that I've mentioned, Conor Gallagher is having a good loan at West Brom. But this is where the standards will continue to go up with these youngsters. If they're going to make it here, they've got to go above and beyond. We had technically the free season last year. I think a lot of the young players that were ready for that opportunity benefited very well from the situation that we were in. They kind of got a free run into the team, into the squad, and then obviously proved themselves to start the games. But these guys won't even make it into the squad if they don't show something. If they don't show something, worth investing in, whenever they're given the opportunity. So there's just so much competition. But I am excited to see these youngsters. Like I said, Aston Villa, I don't expect these guys to play a big part going throughout the season. If I'm looking at the names, Reece James's injury, I'm hoping it's not something that continues to keep niggling on. But if that was to keep happening, then that's where Henry Lawrence and Livermento potentially come into the equation. Because I think Azpilicueta in his last few games seems to have, dropped off a little bit. I'm not going to say he's finished. A lot of people are very quick to use that word, and he denounced them quite quickly last season. But out of these 4 names, I'd say Jude Spoonsup is not even really worth even bringing into this, because he's 16 and we've got 3 strikers. But Bate, Lawrence, Livermento, out of those 3, do you think any 3 potentially, if they have a masterclass tomorrow, have a chance of not making a massive impact, but at least getting more main minutes in the future season?
I hope that if winning tomorrow, and you hope that we then get a fair draw in the 4th round. That's, I think, what Lampard want, because then that's another chance later in the month to rotate. They're doing the 4th and 5th round draw simultaneously, so we're gonna we'll know sort of the next 2 rounds if we get through who we're going to play. So you'd hope in both of those cases that at least one more round, like we had last year against Hull, that there's another chance to rotate. I think it's been very difficult. I mean, last year you got to remember that different squad, different season. Gilmore really came on the scene, and we had a massive injury crisis around March time. And that's when Gilmore, who'd already been training with the first team regularly and had impressed and got some bench appearances for Lamps, had then got into the first team against Everton and Liverpool. Right, I don't feel that's going to happen this year, because I think it's a bigger squad. There's more players we brought in from the summer. So I think it'd be difficult to see any of them. But I guess for their sake, coming off the bench, even if I could see Spoonsup Bell, like he comes on for like the last 5 minutes, for instance, and maybe gets a few pot shots away, and hopefully maybe hits a target. That's sort of what you're hoping for. And for all these players, it's just great to be involved with the first team. I mean, despite what you're thinking about the first team at the moment, I'm sure it's amazing for these young players, whether it be Spoonsup Bell, playing and training with Giroud, Abraham and Werner, or whether it's the midfielders and Lewis Bate playing alongside or training with, players not that much older than him in Mason Mount, but seeing what Mount's accomplished at Chelsea so far, and seeing what he's done, I'm sure it's a big inspiration. And I'm sure the likes of Reece James, Tammy, and Mason, and even Callum to an extent, a big inspiration for these younger players. There is a chance, there is a chance to get into this team, and that's what they hopefully will use as motivation in the future.
That's what's so nice as well, like you said about this team. Even though there is a tax potentially on these youngsters not making it, because there's so many young players already ahead of them after last season, but there is that thing where the bridge from Cobham to the first team, the bridge from the academy to the first team has never been closer. You've literally got players in that squad when you come into it on Sunday that can put an arm around you and say, listen, I was at your place last year. When we played Grimsby, how many of these players, like Reece James maybe getting his first goal, Mason Mount had been, just getting himself into the team, Tammy as well. I think Andrew played that day as well. So even the likes of Andrew can put his arm around, a Lewis Bate and say, listen, this is me last year. I made my debut against Grimsby or whatever, and I understand how you're feeling, but this is your moment. Seek it, grasp it. So there's a lot of that in the club, and there's a lot of togetherness around that age group. So I am looking forward to seeing, first of all, how many minutes they get. It would be great. I do expect them to come off the bench. It would be great if we could wrap this game up at half time. There's no reason, again, no disrespect to Morecambe, but there's no reason why this team shouldn't be able to do that. Whatever team they put out, there is a lot of seniors and a lot of depth that need minutes. They should all be able to take on Morecambe.
5 subs, isn't there? So there's more opportunity to rotate, and because there could be some players who start the game at like 60 minutes if the game's already done, that Frank will look at and go, I'll take these players off for Friday, because it's a relatively, I guess, quick turnaround. You'd say to Fulham, because it's Fulham is a massive game for Lampard.
Huge.
So there'll be that as well. So there'll be chance hopefully to rotate off the bench. So yeah, it would be nice to see a lot. I would say I agree with you. I think Lawrence is probably the one I look at and go, he's most likely. But the fact that James is now back in training, and from the tone of Lampard's voice made it sound like he'll be ready for Fulham, or at least he'll be fit very soon. Makes me believe that he'll just go with Dave. Dave's had a full week to prepare for this game. There's no sort of, and then he'll probably go back to being second choice again once Reece is back. So I think Dave, this is sort of game you want him in, just for that experience and that sort of older head, because you don't want to change the team too drastically. And I think there are certain players that you just want to get back into form, right? In a very difficult period of the season. And I know that winning 7 or 8-0 tomorrow won't make any sort of difference to people's feelings about the current season. But internally, for those players, I think it could do them a lot of good. I think a Kai Havertz could really benefit from tomorrow, a bit like he did against Barnsley. Yeah.
Do you know what it is? Yeah, it would provide a really nice break. Like you said at the start of the show, if we were to win 7-8-0, I know it won't change a lot of the mood in terms of long-term questioning Lampard, questioning a lot of this team as well, mentality-wise. Are they able to get themselves out of this hole that they've put themselves in the Premier League? But it would be nice for, I think, as a fan base, for everybody to have a distraction. I spoke about that earlier. We haven't had, I think that's another downside to recently, that, there has been a big gap between this game and Manchester City. There hasn't been much time for distraction or much transfer news or anything, which some people say is good, because it's allowed us to reflect correctly and really question what's going on. But some people also say, like, there's no better way to turn this around than to play football, right, and to get a good result. And we haven't been able to do that for a week now. So I think it would be nice for the fan base if they had some nice goals to reflect on, some breakthrough performances from some of the youngsters. If they come on, if a youngster gets a goal or has a really good cameo, I'm not saying it's going to change the world, but it would be great for the fan base to have something to chew on until the Fulham game. And there's some goals to reflect on. There's some good performances to reflect on, and we can kind of put all of the not toxicity, because I only really engage in the two opinions when they're done respectfully, which they have been when I've been going through my TL, because I've muted everybody that can't handle that. But it would be nice to put away all the questioning and the negativity for just for a minute, just for a minute, and shed the light on the youngsters if they play well, because they're gonna, say some of these players do have masterclasses, and they, I'm not talking about the seniors, I'm talking about the young players. They will deserve our attention. Do you know what I mean? They're not part of all of the difficulties that we've suffered this season. Your likes of your Lewis Bates, your Gilmores, even they're not part of the mess that we've got ourselves into in the league. So I think it would be nice to have a day or two where we just reflect on their performances, do a bit of propaganda for them, and distance ourselves from the Premier League. And then, like you said, Fulham is a huge game, and obviously it's not a preview for Fulham, but the senior players that do start this game, this is a huge game for them, because it's an opportunity to show. And I think we're going to touch on Lampard's comments in the press conferences that may have been taken out of context or may have been misunderstood. He said that he was excited by the situation that he was in. And I think there's many ways to look at it. I think other people maybe are potentially using it as a stick to beat him with at this point, but they're looking at it as he was basically excited that we're losing games, and he's excited that we're not doing well. I think he's excited to see the mental strength of not only himself, because, successful people do enjoy, and this may sound crazy, but successful people do enjoy being under pressure. they do enjoy being under the cosh as somewhat in the fact that, okay, now it's my time to prove myself. You know, when you're under a lot of tension, a lot of friction, that's sometimes that brings the best out of people, and that potentially is what he's talking about. The fact that he's excited to be in a high pressure job where he knows that he can't just, you know, his whole career he was never able to just, you know, coast along at any point. So he's used to pressure. I think people forget that, but I think he's just excited to see the mental strength of him and his own squad at this point, because this is a critical moment for him. Like he said, I think that Fulham game, I think he knows it, and I think we all know it. He can't afford to lose that game. Do you know? I know the board have come out and said, you know, there's time, there's patience, and whatnot. But every board says that until they sack who they're going to sack. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think, you know, it's been said quite a few times on many streams, and I agree with it. Is that I don't think they're going to sack him immediately. You know, I don't think his sacking is imminent, but I think the further we drift away from top four, if results keep going poorly, they will start to ramp up. You know, they're going to start ramping up the search, and at some point, then he will get the chop, because I don't think they'll tolerate finishing outside the top four. Well, at least I don't think they'll tolerate not trying to finish in the top four. And what I mean in the sense of that is that if it's a downward spiral where we're not looking like we're going to finish there, the club will make that change to try and finish in the top four. I think they'd rather top four than to, you know, stick with sentiment and just let this carry on to the end of the season. So Fulham is a huge game. But finally, I do want to touch on a very final point in the last 10 minutes. And people, get your questions in as well for the last 10 minutes that we're going to run here, because we're gonna wrap up soon as well. Who would you play up front? Because it's a difficult one, and I spoke about this a few times a few days ago. But you got Timo Werner, who, and then we'll go through our starting 11s maybe after this. But you got Timo Werner, who's lacking confidence and can definitely do with a goal in this type of game. I don't think this game needs Giroud, so I'll take him out of that for me personally. But then you've also got Tammy, who isn't getting a lot of game time recently, but probably does deserve some game time. And we know if we're going to start Havertz, him and Tammy did show a bit of chemistry against Barnsley. They did show to be on a similar wavelength. I think it's easier for Havertz to move forward into the box with someone who's mobile like Tammy. But then you've also got Hudson-Odoi as well, who seems to have a good relationship with those two. So who would you play? Who would you start in that instance really up front?
I don't know. Well, I've got a feeling that Giroud's going to start, despite my feeling that I think he probably should be starting the Premier League games a lot more, or at least, you know, should have been starting the Man City game. And I think he should probably be starting the Fulham game as well. I think that it's difficult because once again, you're sort of thinking about getting players into form. I mean, I don't think he's going to do it, but I wouldn't mind seeing Timo Werner start, just because he needs to put the ball in the back of the net. And, you know, people will then rule it out as saying, oh, look at the opposition. But he, you know, you never know. For a striker, it could literally be as simple as he puts one in the back of the net, and then sort of the light switches on and he's suddenly clinical Werner again. And the next week he starts again and he starts scoring regularly. That strikers a bit like, in a sense, you know, strikers are a bit like that. Sometimes they can just feed off that a bunch and sort of scuff shots then go in, you know, a few weeks later because they're full in confidence, whilst, you know, really, you know, we've seen Werner recently where he struck shots really well, but they've hit the bar and gone out. So for him, I wouldn't mind seeing him start the game. I just don't know. I think the fact that Frank Lampard played him the full 90 against Man City just lends me to believe it's going to be one of Tammy or Giroud. And I think that it probably will be Giroud. I could see him scoring a couple tomorrow because that's the type of thing Giroud does. But yeah, Tammy, it's very difficult, isn't it? Whenever we go into an FA Cup third round against lower league opposition, you're always sort of trying to sort of summarize how much rotation there's going to be. You know, it's very hard to judge a team compared to like the Premier League because we don't get FA Cup third rounds against Morecambe every week. So, you know, the approach to it is going to be quite intriguing to me. So I wouldn't be bothered. Any of them I'm happy to see up front, to be honest, because I think all three of them can score tomorrow. So I think that it probably the person who needs it most is Timo Werner, but I just don't know if Frank will play him. Yeah.
Would you change formation before we pick our teams? And everybody put your starting 11s into the chat as well. I want to see what you guys go with. Would you change formation? Because there's obviously calls for playing two up front, or would you stick with the 4-3-3?
I think it'd be a 4-3-3 that could maybe look like a 4-2-3-1, in a sense that if you play a 4-3-3 with Gilmour and Jorginho both in the same team, and you have Jorginho the deepest player, and then maybe Gilmour a little bit behind him. If Chelsea are dominating the game, I think it will look more like a 4-3-3, but it's hard to know. I can't see him playing two up front because he doesn't do it. So, the only way he's going to play, the only way it could look like two up front is if Werner plays on the left. That's the only way I could see it looking sort of like a two up front. He's not going to go 4-4-2. I think it will likely be 4-3-3. I feel that maybe the formation change might come against Fulham rather than this game. I think he'll just settle for what he's mostly used this season, which has been a 4-3-3.
Yeah, I tend to stick with the 4-3-3 as well. I was calling for a diamond a few weeks ago, but that's when we had Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi and Ziyech all not really fully fit. And I was like, well, we don't have any wingers. So we may as well go with a diamond and not use Werner on the wing. But now that the wingers are back and I said, I want to see Hudson-Odoi, I'll probably stick to the 4-3-3. I'll go through my team first and then make any changes. But in goal, I'd probably start, and get your teams in the chat as well. I want to see what teams you guys pick. I'd probably go with Caballero in goal. Again, I just think we should be trying to offload Kepa this window, and I don't think any game against Morecambe is going to rise or devalue his stock. So I don't think it does anybody any favors. It's just, for me, it's just a waste of time. And I think we shouldn't even tempt him in the fact that he may have a future, because I don't think he does. I think it's just easier if we just allow him to continue to try and find a move and I don't think put him on. I don't think Morecambe is a shop window for Kepa. I don't think that changes anything if he keeps a clean sheet. So I'll probably go Caballero in goal. Left back, I'll probably go Emerson, because I don't see Alonso coming back into this team again. Another player that needs to go in January, 100%. Right back, I'd probably. Do you know what? Because it's at home to Morecambe, and I think we do need to obviously go forward. And I think Aspie's has been a bit below his level lately. I'd probably go with Henry Lawrence at right back. Like I said, as we said earlier in the show, I know a lot of people have been speaking about Livermento, but Henry Lawrence has already trained with the first team. So I'm trying to put what I want and also, for once, balance it with realism. So I think if you're going to see anyone start out of the two of him and Livermento, it'll be Lawrence. So I'd like to see Lawrence at right back. Very talented young player, good going forward. And I think we're at home to Morecambe, right? So we do need to go forward. So that's where my logic comes into that. And I think it's not a danger playing him against this level of opposition. This is the kind of opposition they play against in the cup games. The under-23 cup game, they have a cup competition. They'd be playing against this level. Morecambe are 7th in League 2. So that for me is not a dangerous bet to go with. And then I'd probably go with Rudiger and Tomori. I don't think it's likely to see Tomori, but I'd like to see it. Probably, I don't really mind what side of the pitch each one plays, who's comfortable where. But I think it would be good to see them two pair up again. They did strike some sort of relationship, especially against Ajax last season, where Zuma played as well, and that was a very formidable performance in Amsterdam. So I would like to see that, and just for the sheer fact there's no need to play Zuma or Silva in this game. How do you feel about that back five to start with?
Yeah, I just, once again, we get back to the Tomori thing. Is Tomori going to start? Because if he doesn't, then it's probably going to be Zuma, isn't it? It's definitely not going to be Thiago Silva. You're not going to be playing Silva in games you don't have to.
Yeah.
I couldn't put Tomori in my team because I just can't see it happening. I think that it'd be nice. It's just based on all the evidence we've seen. Frank has many times this season had the chance to rotate. The only thing you could say is, Tomori did feature on the bench. Was it Aston Villa? He was in the
I'm
squad.
not sure, but he was on the bench. And I think now this is the first time Christensen's been injured.
I still go with Zuma because I think that there's a gap between this game and City and also Fulham, and Zuma had a difficult day against City, so maybe you'd want to play Zuma again. I think I'd say this is guaranteed. This should be Tomori, obviously, because you're rotating centre backs in and out for an FA Cup game against a League 2 side. But with how far Tomori's fallen and how little looking he gets under Lampard now, you just, a bit like Alonso, you go, he's an outcast, isn't he? He's not, even in the picture. So I'm still going to go with Zuma.
Yeah. Midfield, I'd probably go Jorginho at the base. I think there's really, this is the perfect game for him, isn't it? You know what I mean? This is an opportunity for him to just dictate tempo, get the ball, spray it around. And yeah, I play Gilmour slightly further ahead. I think he's a little bit more aggressive with his passing. I think he's going to look to find the forwards a bit quicker. And I'm looking forward to seeing him, because every time he plays, he does always have an influence. That's one thing with him. He does want to have a lot of touches. He's very, very much taking up a leadership role when we're in possession. So I'd like to see him. And I'd probably play him in the Mason Mount role, because that is naturally where we should have the more industrious 8. Is what I've always wanted to see, because I always want to see Havertz as the one that gets into the final third and is in the box. So I'd like to see Gilmour in that Mason Mount role. I think he can do the role. I think he can switch to play like Mason Mount does. I think he can, show the same work rate, and show the same tenacity to help out defensively with Jorginho as well. He can tackle, he's even tried to, go for the aerial duels when he did get the game time as well. And he's got that awareness about him where he knows that he needs to play in a deeper position as well. So I think that's the perfect person to replace Mason Mount in the team. And then I'd go Havertz in the other side, and definitely further forward. When you're looking at Gilmour, Jorginho, those two like to come deep, get the ball. So there's no doubts that yes, he's playing right-sided 8, but he's going to move into the 10 and move into the false line. And just quickly to speak on Havertz, because a lot of people are saying, oh, he can't play 8. Lampard played 8 most of his career. He still got into the box. He still scored goals. That's exactly what I see with Kai Havertz. It's not the fact that he's playing 8 for me. It's the fact that he's not in the box. It's the fact that he's not getting into the box. There's no reason why in a 3-man midfield, someone that's playing one side of the 8 can't get into the box. We saw Lampard do it his whole career. We just need to actually legislate and have that happen where his average position is higher up the pitch and he is getting into the box. I see too many times Havertz is so deep and he's not getting into the box. When we're whipping in the crosses, particularly the crosses, when they come into the box, we should have more numbers in the box than we do. If we're going to score from those crosses, those high volume of crosses that we put in, we need to have players in the box. And there's not many better in our squad in terms of final product, a player that can arrive in the box, a player that can use his head, can finish, volley, all these things. Havertz, that's what he did at Leverkusen for the second half of last season. So I need to see him in the box more. If we're going to start, pumping in crosses and all these things, then I need to see him in the box more. How do you feel about that 3-man midfield? Anything you change?
Yeah, that's the same one I would go for, absolutely. I think that's quite obvious just based on the amount of minutes recently. Havertz hasn't been starting games in the Premier League. So, yeah, I'd be a little bit stunned if he doesn't start this game because it just feels like a perfect opportunity to potentially, he's one of those players that if he has a really good game, despite the opposition, you'd maybe think could potentially break into the team against Fulham, or at least, be further in the thoughts of Lampard to start that game. Because I look at Kovacic, he hasn't impressed recently. I don't think there's a good enough argument for Kova to just be instantly in the team. You're giving Mason a full rest, so he'll be fully recharged for Fulham. And, based on what we've seen, we need more runners into the box. It's something Chelsea have had an issue with for quite a few seasons now. Our attackers being too isolated when we're struggling to create chances. And Havertz is that sort of perfect player to get into those areas. And as we saw, the goal he created against Man City is, he has got that ability to, run off his man and, even go into wider positions and has that natural connection with some of our attackers that I think that Lampard during a sticky spell can maybe harness a bit more in attacking areas to create something.
Yeah. And also a lot of people, worry about him playing too deep. I think when you've got Gilmour and Jorginho, like I said, they're going to want to get on the ball in deeper areas. I don't think it's the same as when you have Kante, who's more known for the shorter passes and maybe you have to drop deeper to help him build up play. And to bypass the press. Jorginho and Gilmour should be well capable of bypassing any press. I don't expect Morecambe to press anyway too much. I think they'll sit quite deep. But that there shouldn't, I think you'll probably see Havertz naturally in the 10. I don't think the 8 and the 10 are too different. It's really just about, the player being allowed, potentially under instruction to get forward when we're on the ball. Havertz is very good with his work rate and getting back into position and all these things. But when we're on the ball, I do want to see him floating further forward as we move up the pitch. So that's just a hope of mine. And then the front three, we've got a super chat here from Kevin. Thanks so much, bro. Werner should be dropped. He was missing clear one-on-one chances even when out wide. The position he plays does not matter. He's Bundesliga merchant. I'm not going to disagree that he was, not doing the basics correctly. Yeah, he is missing chances. So I don't think it can all be put on the blame in the position, as we saw against Man City. Even when he played up front, I didn't think he was particularly great. But it was a difficult game for everyone. And it's probably not the right opposition to say, right, first game up front, go and deliver the business. So that is a bit unfair. But there's a lot of basics that he still needs to improve on in fundamentals in his game. But I disagree with you there. I would start him against Morecambe. I think he's the guy that I'd start up front. I think he has to start. I think YB1 put that in the chat earlier as well. A player like Werner, who's in such inconsistent form and such poor form, really, if we're being real. And I've criticised him a lot recently. I've criticised Lampard mainly, actually, for not dropping him more than Werner, because at this point, you can't expect a player to keep, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. For me, he needed to be dropped and he needed to be rested. However, I would not start him against Man City. Today, for the Morecambe game, I would have started him. I think this is the perfect game for him, because this is a game where you say to him, right, you're going to go up front and you have to score. Simple as that. Do you know what I mean? This is your opportunity against a League 2 team to get your shooting boots on. We're going to put you up front. We've got Havertz in the team as well, who's going to drift into the box as well. He's going to play close to you. We've got creators, who I'm going to name my wingers as well in a minute. And I think that he's going to get chances. You're playing against Morecambe. So I don't think this game, even if he scores, this is like a redemption thing, where redemption season for Werner, where suddenly he has to start against Fulham. But I think for his own confidence, we're going to need him as we get later on into the season. And I am expecting us not only to utilise him better, but I'm expecting him to improve as well as the season goes on. Same with Kai Havertz. We're going to need him. So you're not going to get a better opportunity to get his confidence levels up. So I would definitely start him. And I'd go Callum Hudson-Odoi on the left. And then on the right, it's a tough one between. I definitely rest Pulisic. I think he hasn't been up to his normal levels recently, but I do still think he's gonna come good in the next couple of weeks. I can see signs. It's really between Ziyech and then do you play someone like a Tino Andrin? I probably go Ziyech to start if he's fit. I think he is fit, isn't he, Ziyech?
Yeah, well, he's fully fit. He's fully fit now. It's just he could only play obviously 60 minutes last week. Interesting. I have not sort of contemplated Ziyech being in this game at all, because I felt that, I don't know why. I know he looked a little bit sluggish, and once again, you sort of get into this mindset that it could be a good time to get his match fitness back up, sharpness up. But I just felt it'd be a game that Frank, being cautious about fitness with his wingers this season, would think, if I can rest Pulisic and Ziyech, I'm going to do it. Because you want those players fresh and ready for the next batch of Premier League games, because we've got some midweek Premier League games in there as well. So it's I didn't really think about Ziyech, because I felt that Andrew, I feel this team's going to be very similar to the one that started against Krasnodar a few weeks back. So I feel that Andrew will start either on the left or the right. The good thing about Callum is you can play him on the left or the right. I still think he's better on the right personally. I just think he looks, in the times I've watched, he's always found it difficult to play on the left, to be honest, at Chelsea, because of Hazard and Pulisic. But I've always liked him on the right, because I just think he's a little bit more dangerous with the options to cut in onto his left foot. He scored against Nottingham Forest last year in the FA Cup third round in the third round by doing exactly that, and hopefully he'll have a similar impact tomorrow. So I'd probably play Andrew on the left. I think it's a massive statement if Ziyech does start, to be honest. I think that would, to me, ring bells that, Frank Lampard is really taking this game more seriously than a usual FA Cup third round. Do you know what I'm saying? Even though
he should be chasing an emphatic win, if I'm honest. A 1 or 2-0 probably won't cut it in terms of the mood. I think really we should be. This is a good opportunity to really boost morale. So I would, I agree with you. If he does start Ziyech, it would be a statement. But I think he does need to make some sort of statement in the fact that he wants to not only win this game, but win it emphatically. We need that kind of morale booster, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's one of those things, isn't it, where you've seen a lot of stories about these young players coming in, and the fact Frank has a big squad, and it's as well, we're at that stage of the season where we've had injuries to players, and the congested nature of this year. Obviously, there's that concern about fatigue coming out of the Christmas period now, that you have to take into consideration as well. I mean, what would be the reaction if Ziyech played and maybe got a knock and then was out Fulham? That's the question I'd pose to people, is because people would want Ziyech to play that game. So it's tough. I think that you could still, for me, the team, if we're going for the weakest team he could put out based on mostly first team players, or he brings in Ziyech, to me that team should be easily putting Morecambe aside and and then hopefully opening up the game that Frank can make subs later on to bring on the young players.
Yeah, I would. Tino Andrian's a good shout actually. As someone I would like to see. I don't know how good he is on the right wing. Do you think he would be decent over there? I mean, I don't mind seeing Callum Hudson-Odoi on the right. Maybe my hope is that they would interchange, but I think it would be quite good to see Callum on the left just to see if his game has progressed. Because like you said, and I've been saying it as well, I think he's been really good on the right, you know, whether it's been with Reece James and the chemistry that they share, but also his crossing ability, his ability to cut in on his left. I know a lot of people in the chat are saying he's right footed 100%, but he has cut in from the left a lot in his Chelsea first team career and scored goals with his left. They've been scruffy shots, but they've still gone in. And I don't think he's been deadly from the left-hand side in terms of his finishing consistently to say that he has to play left wing. Although I would like to see it in this game to see if his game has developed, because he has developed a lot this season. So if Andrian was to play on the right, should we be worried about how effective he would be? That would be my only worry. He's playing somewhat out of position there, isn't he?
I don't think massively, because he started on the left, didn't he, in a front three against Krasnodar. So I guess there's a feeling from Frank probably in this game that you'd hope Chelsea are going to get a lot of opportunities, and the nature of these games, if they start going well for you, the sort of the confidence of the opposing team sort of goes out the window, and sort of sometimes it becomes quite easy to create opportunities at will, to be honest. And you'll see players popping in and out of positions, and it almost feels like sort of a park game, to be honest, where you see players surging forward with no sort of risk, with sort of urgency to get goals. Because if we're 3-0 up by half time, I think you'll see that there isn't that much of a concern in the second half about who's playing where, and there shouldn't be a concern about who's playing where, especially for Andrew, as a young player coming into the team, just getting those minutes. And it's not the same as we bought him for 60 million and he's coming into the prime of his career, and we should be utilising him in massive Premier League games. He's a young player that's still getting minutes, so he should be happy to get those minutes. And it's not, it's, to me, playing him left wing or right wing it's not like Frank is asking him to play at centre back. The way we talk about fluidity within this team, there should be fluidity of movement, that sometimes those players will shift around. So even if he starts on the left, I could see him popping up on the right as well. And as well, Kai, if Kai's playing, you'll see Kai occupy those wider positions too at points.
Yeah, 100%. And just to end the stream on an interesting note, because people are absolutely losing the plot in the chat, because Carefree Youth has tweeted with some emojis, and I'm going to ask him for you guys what the situation is, because a lot of people are freaking out, and they always do when Carefree Youth tweets cryptically like this, because we've got the chat spamming, is Lampard being sacked? To be honest, if it's there's 3 angry emojis, I'd say it's probably someone's got injured or something. But I'll ask him. Let's see if we get a response.
Probably have to wait for some Athletic article to drop.
Yeah, I'll ask him in DMs and hopefully I'll get something. But a lot of people are freaking out over that tweet, as they always do. But look, people, I highly doubt Lampard has been sacked the day before Morecambe. So relax. Bro, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I think we've literally gone through everything. Do you know what I mean? We've dissected everything. It's good doing previews with you, because I feel like we don't miss anything. If anyone comes back to watch this later and you're hoping for topics to be discussed, I don't think we've really missed out on anything. I didn't want to dwell on recycled topics that we've been speaking about, throughout the week, really. But it's good to just escape a little bit and speak about just solely the game, really, and obviously the different selection headaches that Lampard's got on his shoulders, going towards a fixture that we have to win. But I would like to see us win it emphatically as well, if possible. Let the people know where to find you, bro. Let's get those people over to your channel. You got a preview to drop.
So Son of Chelsea, just search that on YouTube. You'll find my channel. I dropped a video earlier today about who I would buy and sell in the January transfer window. So it's sort of a 6-minute video where I give you sort of my rundown of what I would do if I was in charge of this January transfer window for Chelsea. Going to have my preview out later today, where I talk about the game, talk about my team. And then tomorrow, I will have my rational perspective out after the game, which is my review and sort of reaction to hopefully a convincing win. So that's where people can find me, and also on Twitter at Son of Chelsea.
Lovely stuff. And I think Carefree Youth is busting my balls here, so I'm not going to read out his reply. Because if I do, people will lose their crap. I'm not going to read out that reply. He's definitely joking. But people, make sure that the link is in the description for Son of Chelsea. Like I said, make sure you subscribe, great content coming out on a daily basis. We're thick and fast coming back into the fixtures now after the Fulham game as well. So there won't be so much lag in between the fixtures. So it's gonna be good to be talking about Chelsea again, regardless of what form we're in. You don't get tired of this. You know what I mean? It's just it's a roller coaster. That's what you sign up for when you support this club. So people, thank you for joining us. We had about 250 of you live here, which is great because I didn't even tell you this was going down today at any time. I just kind of sprung it up on a surprise, which is just another reason as to why you have to hit the notification bell, because I'm never going to tell you what's going on. That's just how I roll. People, I will see you tomorrow for the review, hopefully after an emphatic win. And bless up and enjoy the rest of your evening. In a bit, people.
Perfect.